Hello everybody, a warm welcome to Wisdom from North. My name is Jannecke and I'm here today with Hazel Courtney. Now she has a very fascinating story to tell. She worked as a health journalist in Sunday Times, and in 1998, in April, she had a sudden spiritual awakening and a near-death experience. And after that she wrote several spiritual books, and among them a book that I have here. It's called Countdown to Coherence, and in Norwegian it is Nedtelling til enhet. And I truly recommend this book. In the works of the book, she traveled around the world basically to find answers to what had happened to her. And she spoke to professors, quantum physicists, the doctors, alternative doctors, and she did indeed find some answers, and we're going to talk about that today. Now Hazel, much welcome to Wisdom from North, and how are you doing?
Oh, that's great. Thank you for a very nice introduction. A lovely tanned lady you are.
Yes, I just got home from abroad, so and it's very hot here in Norway for some reason, so I'm like, whew, I look very red, I think.
No, you look perfect, believe me. I wouldn't mind looking like you any day of the week.
Well, I'm very curious to hear about actually if you, before this experience that you had, were you religious at all, or did you have any spiritual beliefs?
Well, what had happened to me was going way back. I was a very vacuous shopaholic, and I thought that the only thing that mattered in life was how much money people had or what kind of clothes they were wearing. You know how most of the youth today are interested in marrying a footballer or being wealthy or being famous or whatever. So, and then what happened was my next door neighbour died where I used to live. It's in a place called Birmingham in England. And I thought I really ought to go across and see my neighbour. And this is when I was in my mid-30s maybe. And I went across to visit my neighbour, and I said how sorry I was that her husband had died. And I'll never forget Norma looking at me and saying, but I can see and hear my husband and talk to him anytime I like. And I thought, oh my God, this woman needs a psychiatrist and some Valium, you know. I thought, whoa. But anyway, she gave me a book, and a little spiritual book. Anyway, it was written by a guy called Tony Neate, 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 but it's many years ago now. And that book spoke of the spirit world, spoke of other realities, spoke about healing. And it was like a light had gone on inside of me. And so in the years that followed, I was already fascinated by health because I'd been sick all my life. And I also started being very interested in the spirit world, and Norma taught me to meditate. But you could never say that I was religious, or I wasn't a Catholic, I wasn't a Protestant, I wasn't anything. I was just a housewife. Well, I wasn't a housewife, I've always worked. But I became very interested in the spiritual side of life. And then, with all the health knowledge that I gleaned over the years, because I had been so sick for the first 35, 40 years of my life, I eventually became a journalist. And I was one of the first alternative health writers in the UK. And I then went on to write an alternative health and spiritual column for the Sunday Times. And then I went to visit, I don't know if you've heard of a Mother Mira. I don't know if she still is, but she used to be based in Germany. She is a fully enlightened master of the self. And I went to receive her blessing, as did hundreds of other people. And the people told me that when I got there, that when you receive what's known as darshan from a fully enlightened person, they look into your eyes very deeply and they pulse you with divine energy, which is channeling through them. And all of her advisors said, oh, you must ask for what you really want. And so when I knelt before Mother Mira, I said I would really appreciate an acceleration of my spiritual growth. So I would say to your viewers, be careful what you wish for, because 3 months later, I went into Harrods, the very famous store in Knightsbridge in London, And as I went through the turnstile that used to be in the bread hall, in those few seconds, the turnstile got stuck. And I couldn't go forward and I couldn't go back. And it was as if a volcanic eruption had gone off inside my body, shooting electrical tremors, huge amounts of pain, shot up into my head. And obviously I was quite frightened. And then within 4 or 5 seconds, I could hear a voice shouting in my head, as clearly as I can hear you now, saying, "See a doctor now." And obviously I was very confused and worried as to what was going on. Anyway, I found my driver very quickly. I rang my doctor. He said, "You better come right now." And I honestly thought, Jannecke, that I had minutes to live. I thought maybe I'd had a heart attack or something. Anyway, as I arrived at the doctor's, they put me on the floor. They attached all the heart monitors to my chest. And my doctor started playing my heartbeat down the phone to a cardiologist. But as he did that, I realized that I could feel, I could hear what the cardiologist was saying to my doctor. And I knew what my doctor was thinking. And I also knew that my heart was fine. So 1 minute I'm a working columnist, I'm a mum, I'm a wife, I'm running 2 homes. And the next minute, the doctor is telling me that my heart is fine, but I already knew that. But when I told him what he was thinking, he was obviously quite apprehensive, as was I, because I didn't know what was going on. And he said, "You better go home and have a cup of tea and just be quiet," because in England, a cup of tea is an answer to absolutely everything. So anyway, when I got home, when I looked in the mirror, I looked younger. Considering it was an enormous shock. My eyes were a different colour. There was another face overshadowing my face. And when my husband came home, and obviously he was very worried, the doctor had called him and said to come home immediately. I was levitating.
What do you mean levitating?
Sorry?
How did you levitate?
Well, your body just lifts up off the bed.
Really?
Oh, God, it was a huge experience. And then I realised I wasn't being allowed to eat physical food. I didn't want to eat physical food. And every question, I was asking hundreds of questions in my head. I was hearing multiple responses, but I didn't know where they were coming from. And I didn't know which, if any of those responses was true. And so then when my husband came home, I started telling him I was going to be very special. I mean, I can laugh now, but it wasn't very funny then. And I told him I was going to be like Uri Geller and I was going to be able to do some incredible things. And obviously my husband was just completely freaking out. But anyway, that night, round about midnight, my brain was on fire. I rang a friend and thank God he was awake and he answered the phone. He said, "You need to eat sugar." He said, "You need to ground yourself." I didn't even know then what grounding was. Anyway, I ate the sugar and I got some sleep. But the next morning, I realized I kept telling people to look into my eyes and they would know who I was. I couldn't face any physical food, even though I love food. I knew what people were thinking before they asked the question. I realized that I could see their potential futures. I knew that I could give people healing. And in the end, the shock of everything that was happening to me, this was over Easter of 1998, which is the traditional time of death and rebirth, of course, in the Christian calendar. And on Good Friday, I developed an intense fever, an intense cold. I couldn't really get out of bed. I mean, I looked horrific. And I was losing weight very fast because I'm very thin, even though I eat lots and lots and lots of food. And in the end, I called a friend of mine who was a medical doctor. And he came. I had a different voice coming out of my mouth that wasn't me. And a friend of mine in London said, "I really feel, Hazel, that you've had a walk-in." And I thought, for God's sake, you know, what's a walk-in? And he said, "I think a spirit has overlaid or joined with your energy field. So now there's two of you in there. And I just thought he was completely off the wall. Anyway, I was making ash. I was manifesting ash through my hands. There were so many things happening. But anyway, on the Easter Saturday, the shock of everything that was happening to me caused me to leave my physical body. And I found myself up on the ceiling of the bedroom, looking down on my physical body, and I was free. It was the most incredible experience. It was like watching a movie below me. And I could see my husband downstairs crying. I could see the doctor stroking my forehead and holding my hand in the bedroom. But anyway, so the story went on and on and on. I was able to see other realities. I was able to definitely see our world's potential futures. I knew that time, as we think about it, is basically totally different. I mean, we live in a linear time where you go from yesterday to today to tomorrow. But I knew that when I was up on that ceiling, I could have gone anywhere in time. Our consciousness can definitely travel in time. But anyway, the whole experience took about 6 to 9 months to ground down and for me to sort myself out, because I had to leave my job with the Sunday Times because I was being affected by and affecting electronic equipment. I didn't know then that we are electrical beings in a physical shell. There was so many things I did not understand, Jannecke. And then, as you mentioned earlier, I went on it's almost been a 10-year journey, interviewing scientists about life after death, the science of enlightenment, the science of miracles, what happens when a person becomes fully enlightened, what enlightenment is, who we really are, a whole mass of subjects. And in between, I've carried on writing health books.
Wow, what a story. I just have to mention, I think you have a small fly on the other side.
Oh!
Yeah.
Oh!
He wanted to join us.
Well, we live in the middle of the countryside, so I'm afraid they're in my office.
Okay, so did you get any answer to if you were like chosen or picked, or why did this happen to you? I mean, I've never heard of a similar experience.
Well, actually, I've heard of hundreds of similar experiences. It's called a spiritual emergency, and it's when a spiritual awakening becomes a physical crisis. Okay. So in other words, I'd asked Mother Mira for an acceleration in my spiritual growth. Well, hey-ho, I got that. I went from neutral to 5th gear and overdrive in approximately 4 seconds. Yeah. So the point is, when most people, all my books now encourage people to awaken slowly to the potential capabilities that we all have access to. So do you remember, well, you're too young to remember, but when I was a young girl, we used to have fairgrounds, and you used to be able to put this ball and you get a hammer and you bang it and it would go up and ring the bell. Well, when I had it was known as a Kundalini opening in Harrods. I went from 0 to 1,000 in like 4 seconds. Now, when that happens, there's an area in the center of the brain called the thalamus. And that is the area that deals with sight, touch, smell, hearing, the physical senses. So, in other words, my senses became so ramped up and so blown open that all veils between this and other realities were blown wide open. And that cooked my nervous system, it cooked my brain, it overloaded my little physical capacity to cope. So I learned that when people meditate, for instance, the thalamus starts to wake up more slowly, and the left frontal lobe of the brain and the right frontal lobe of the brain, they become more integrated. And in the end, the whole brain works differently. You become more intelligent. You become calmer because meditation balances your hormones. You are able to deal, sorry, I'm just going to turn my mobile phone off. You're able to deal with greater amounts of stress, and your body can cope with it better. And slowly but surely, your capabilities will begin to awaken. So people call it the sixth sense. But in fact, it's not so much the sixth sense, it's a heightening of the senses that we already have.
Yeah, because I'm thinking that it can be dangerous not only in the physical way, but also in a mental way.
Well, there's the point. That's a brilliant point, because when people have a sudden and spontaneous, mine's what's known as the spontaneous Kundalini awakening, which triggers a full-on spiritual emergency. Now, many mental homes and a lot of young people who use crack, ecstasy, which I never did. I'm a health writer and I'm a bit too old for all that stuff. But anyway, the point is, a lot of kids who are on crack, a lot of people who are in mental homes, they're having these spontaneous awakenings, and they don't have access to the help that I had.
They're having awakenings through the drugs, you mean?
Well, sometimes cannabis and crack can trigger psychotic episodes. It alters the way the brain works, and it can damage brain function in the long term. And so what is happening is, like, do you remember back in the 60s, people were taking LSD and they were having all these wild and crazy experiences? Well, LSD helps people to cross the veil from this reality into others. But the trouble is, these people don't know how to integrate this knowledge, the same as I didn't know how to cope with it. And a lot of people who can hear the spirit world think they're going mad. A lot of people who take cannabis or drugs end up with spontaneous awakenings. And I've met people who have been diagnosed as being psychotic or bipolar or schizophrenic, when in fact they're hearing the spirit world, but they don't know it.
Right.
So, you know, yes, these are serious illnesses too. And in other words, we are mind, body, and spirit. So you have to look after the whole package.
Was that kind of the reason why you wanted to write this book, to find the answers in a way?
Well, originally I wrote a book called, it's here, originally the book of my actual story is called Divine Intervention.
Okay.
That was the story of my walk-in and what happened to me. And then I went on to get validation for what had happened to me, and that became the second book. But with Countdown to Coherence, I wanted to bring the whole thing together. I want people to understand that they're capable of far more than they think they are, or that they even believe they are. And I want people to understand that many of the things that they might call paranormal events are not weird or frightening at all, that there are plenty of logical explanations. But you have to go out there and find them, and that's what I've spent the last 10 years doing.
So what did surprise you the most when you went around and talked to all these
oh my God. And, crikey, now you're really asking. I suppose I find the whole subject of time travel absolutely fascinating. I also find the whole subject that if we could all have our brains become coherent, which is what I talked about earlier, when all the brain is working as one unit, when the thalamus is working cohesively with the rest of the brain, we have the potential capability to heal ourselves. And once you and your energy field become totally coherent, because coherence prevails, this coherence you can pass on to others. You know, like, Jannecke, if you're in a really good mood and you walk into a room, that happiness is catching and negativity is also catching. Well, when I was in that super heightened state, I remember once a scientist said to me, "How did the world smell to you when you were in that really heightened state?" I said, "It stinks." And that's because we exist inside the mind of what people call God. And every thought we have and every deed that we commit to has an effect on the whole. Right. So the more you can be positive and the more you can be happy and the more you can work on you, the better off you and the world is going to be.
Right.
And,
yeah.
And I'm also fascinated by the fact that when you die and all of the information about Jannecke or about Hazel is contained in the 7 chakras in your physical body, the energy vortices inside your body. And actually very shortly on my new website we'll be showing a film where people can actually see these vortices and they can actually see themselves as a being of pure energy. So that will be available on my website in a couple of weeks, so that's worth watching.
Wow, amazing.
Now where was I? What were we talking about?
Well, I was curious about, I think I read in the book, maybe it was Gary Schwartz who said it, that it can be dangerous if everybody had, like you, like a sudden spiritual awakening, because we would manifest bad thoughts if we hadn't worked on ourselves. Is that the way?
Absolutely. Imagine if everyone started going through what I went through all at one time. We'd be living in a great big madhouse. And there are some days when I watch the news, when I see what's going on in Egypt and when I see what's going on in Syria, what we need is for more people to become awakened in a calm and stable environment. And the more people that can think happy, positive thoughts, and the more that people can awaken the underlying field of intelligence that underlies all of life into your energy field, the sooner the world can be a better place. Because, for instance, there have been more than 50 trials on group meditators who've been to Tel Aviv, they were in Kosovo, they were in Bosnia, they've done it in areas like Miami, and they showed that when you have, because obviously the more people doing this, the more amplified the effect. And so when you have a group of people having an intention to do nothing more than awaken this loving field of universal intelligence into their environment, crime went down, incidents of conflict went down, incidents of attacks on people, car theft. And in Tel Aviv, where there was a lot of war going on at the time in Beirut, the number of people who were injured was a lot less. And so our thoughts contribute to the whole, our deeds contribute to the whole. And this is really important for people to get.
Yeah, I've understood that. And I've talked a lot to friends about this and family. And I think it's a common, maybe, thought that we get bad conscience in a way to be so happy because we watch the news, we see Egypt and we think, oh my God, that's awful. It's awful. And you end up having that feeling, the world is awful. It's so awful. Now, how can you like change that to positive thinking when what you see is just so...
You're absolutely right. It's really, really, really hard. But I think, first of all, you can almost stop reading the newspapers for a week. Create your own reality of peace, because not everybody in the world is fighting. You know, there are lots of people out there who are good people who are doing good works. If only the media could report more on the good news, the mass consciousness would change. And Edgar Cayce wrote about this years and years ago, how our thoughts attach to a grid, whether it's our personal grid or our town's grid or a country grid or the planetary grid. And when these thoughts reach a plateau, they become our reality. Okay. So the more people can tune out from the violence and send their love, and if they want to send money to help those people, that's fine. Every one of us has to do what we can, where we can. But the more you can stay positive and stay loving and calm within yourself, the sooner this calmness can attach to the grid, and the sooner that can become our reality. And that is becoming absolutely crucial right now.
Yeah, that is what is so fascinating. It doesn't only applies to ourselves to do this work. It applies to the whole world. If we do work on ourselves, it will help the world.
Yeah, but a lot of people just cannot grasp that. I mean, I've actually seen thought form orbs. When I went to the first orb conference in Sedona, and I'll explain what orbs are in a minute, where there was a very focused meditator who was focusing a specific thought, you could actually see the thought as an orb outside his physical body. A thought is a physical thing. It goes somewhere and it has an effect. And scientists have now shown that as well as this electric atom molecule physical world, meaning your office, my office, the whole planet, there is also an unseen world called the magnetic information wave level that is affected by mind. And when you couple through meditation, you create a sacred space and you couple with this other level of reality, you can affect physical events. You can affect physical matter. So when you see an enlightened master of the self, have you ever seen an enlightened master manifesting ash or manifesting physical objects?
Nope.
It's incredible to view, but they are manifesting, they have totally coherent brain function, and Einstein knew that matter and energy were interchangeable, and so therefore with their coherent thoughts you can pull from this other level of reality, you can couple with it, and you can actually organize physical events and objects to appear into this reality. It's incredible.
And you did that, right? In that period?
I did it for a short time, but I didn't know how I was doing it, and I didn't know what was happening. But now, like, for instance, next weekend I'm going to Frankfurt to interview an avatar, a master of the self, Swamiji Vishwananda, gorgeous young man, and he can easily manifest objects. When your brain is totally coherent, what you give out is what you get back. You have 40,000 thoughts every single day, believe it or not. So everybody needs to look at what they're thinking all the time. I'm too thin. I'm never going to meet the right man. I'm never going to have the right job. And they have to change their attitude. And once they change their attitude to a more positive one, then their life will start to change. You literally magnetize into your life what you think about the most.
I'm wondering about then fate and destiny. Do you think that some things are meant to happen?
Yes, I do. I certainly do believe that certain events, I think you come in with a blueprint, and I think sometimes the blueprint gets interrupted by like world events or something. Like, oh God, let me try and give you an example. I mean, for instance, I've been at dinner parties where people have said, oh, the people in Sudan, they're all starving because they have chosen to come back. This is their karma. They've chosen to come back and starve, you know, to awaken the world to their plight. Well, if you were to say that to a person, they'd say you were crazy. So I would say at a soul level, you may have chosen to do that. But basically on a physical level, you have certainly not. It's more the social circumstances and the lack of rain. And sometimes events overwhelm your personal self. Like, look what Hitler caused in the Second World War. This is one man that caused 100 million people to die. And if you said those people chose to be there, maybe at a soul level they did. But I believe, yes, certain events are set in stone. Yes, I believe we come with a blueprint. Yes, I believe that sometimes that blueprint can be interrupted. But I feel that we still have a degree of free will. And so you can choose what you eat. You look gorgeous. You look very healthy. You obviously look after yourself. And so every day, the choices you make are already affecting your future. So if the people in Egypt now could agree to live in peace, but, you know, they're not online. They have no idea of the subjects that we're talking about. Many of them have closed minds. And until more of us can help people open their minds, this chaos will continue, the same as the weather extremes that continue. Everything is going to become more and more heightened now until we start to really listen.
Is that in connection with 2012 and everything you're talking about now?
Well, what happened at the end of 2012 is a 2 and a 1 make 13. And a 13 denotes, well, 3 denotes mind, body, and spirit. It's the 3 into the 1. And so now is the time for us to awaken to these other realities and realize that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience, that we are recycled energy and information, that you, Jannecke, are absolutely eternal. And when you finish with this physical body, you will move out of linear time and become that orb existing outside of time and space, which is what I was doing in my bedroom on that Easter Saturday. And at that moment, you can then travel in time, and you can then potentially reincarnate into any period in time that is right for your soul's growth. Now, that doesn't freak you out.
I read about that because you were in Dharma and Her, and I just want to talk a little bit about that too. This place in Italy, and you visited a guy called Falco who made this beautiful place, and they do time travel. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Okay, very quickly. Very sadly, Falco died actually about, he moved on. He passed on about 6 weeks ago, which is very, very sad actually, because he was an amazing alchemist. But this was a man who was fully a master of the self. He was able to travel in time. He was able to affect all manner of events. And he was inspired, for want of a better word, to build some underground temples in a place called Damanhur, which is close to the Alps. It's near Turin in Italy. And it's become like the 8th wonder of the world. They have created these underground temples that are mind-blowing. And they've got the largest, I think it's now the 2nd largest underground Tiffany dome in the world. And what they have created there is an incredible coupling device. So there's a whole community there. There's over about 1,500 people who live in, it's called Damanhur, but they have their own currency. They have their own supermarkets. They have their own university where you can learn about time travel, healing, it's absolutely phenomenal what they've done. But everybody gives some of their time towards the community free of charge for about 4 hours a month. So they have doctors, they have lawyers, they have vineyards, they have all manner of different types of people, very intelligent people. And it was just so wonderful. When I ate there, all the food is organic. All the homes are eco homes. And on the homes, on the people's homes that live in this valley, they've painted huge butterflies and huge flowers out of their admiration for nature. And now a lot of people around the world, ministers and governments, where they're building new towns and new cities, they are visiting Damanhur as a template for towns and cities of the future, because they've won lots and lots of EU awards because of their eco-friendly buildings.
Yeah, because they were building this in all secrecy, right? For many
years.
Yeah,
it took him about 8 or 10 years, and then it was discovered by the Italian government. Somebody said they were a cult, which they are not, I can assure you. And the Italian police swooped on Damanhur, and they were absolutely astonished when they went down into the temples. But anyway, the whole thing was eventually sorted out, and now visitors can book and they can go into the temples via a lift, and it is the most incredible experience.
And then you learned a bit about time travel, so apparently it's possible to go back in time.
It is possible, I believe, to go back in time, definitely, because consciousness can be anywhere. At the Stanford Research Institute, with people like Russell Targ, back in the 50s, and even, for the last 50 years, the Russians, the Chinese, the Americans, they've all been doing time travel via the mind. And so they would be asked, they would be given coordinates at the Stanford Research Institute, and in their mind they would travel to these coordinates and they would report what they saw there. And then the researchers, years later, would discover that sometimes they were seeing buildings and events that had taken place 50 years earlier. So time is not quite as we think it is, and it's a huge subject, but definitely there is no question in my mind that when you die, you can then travel anywhere you like. But people like Falco have this ability, I believe, to travel in their physical bodies and go forward and backward in time.
Oh my goodness.
And I truly believe, I've been to Arizona and I've been to various places around the world where I believe there are what they call stargates. There are energy vortices where you can move from this reality into others. By the way, I do have to tell you, if anyone had told me any of this 12 years ago, before I had my experience, I would have said they were nuts. But, you know, I've met some really, really clever scientists like Professor Gary Schwartz at the University of Arizona, Professor Fred Travis, who has been studying the brains of enlightened masters for 35 years. I met a wonderful shaman scientist called Alberto Velodo, who told me how shamans can travel down various timelines and they can actually see what's going to happen to you if you continue living the life you're living now. And I have to tell you that our potential futures at the moment are not looking very good. We are at a crossroads here. We need to start thinking and acting very positively. And I think there's almost going to be like a splitting of consciousness,
okay,
a splitting of realities, because there are almost hundreds and hundreds of thousands of other realities that are existing all around us, but they're simply existing on different frequencies. We exist in this world in our little bubble, if you like, but even people like Stephen Hawking and Brian Greene in America, they all now say, and they're quite happy to be quoted as saying, and they make television programs saying that there are hundreds of thousands of other realities all around us, but most people can't see them. And when you couple with these other level of realities that exist outside of linear time, but within, we have access to it, then you can travel to these other realities. And what really blows me away is that in the moments between going to bed and actually going to sleep, and in the moments when you think you're asleep, between waking and dreaming, hang on, I hope I've got this right, you are passing through this whole plethora of different consciousnesses. Do we have time for me just to look up that sentence?
It's the astral plane, isn't it?
Well, it's what people call the astral plane, but the thing is, it's actually everything. It's the underlying field of intelligence that underlies all of life. And if you pass through this level of reality, hang on, I think it is here. He says, listen to this, it blows my mind every time I read it. It says, EEG research suggests that in the moments between sleeping and waking, and in the moments between sleeping and dreaming, as the activity of the ego mind and body settles down somewhat, our consciousness passes through the field of universal intelligence that administers all of life. Several times a night, we pass through this basic level of reality in which we have access to all information independent of time and space.
Who was saying this?
Sorry?
Who was saying this?
Oh, this is Professor Frederick Travis.
Okay.
And he's one of the world's leading researchers on what happens in the brain of truly enlightened men and women. And I think if you just Google Professor Frederick Travis, you can see some fascinating research.
Okay, so that means that you have actually access at that
to different realities, to different frequencies.
Right.
So sometimes, like some of my dreams last night, I thought, wow, I could never think of those buildings. I could never have invented those places. But maybe I was actually existing in those realities because consciousness is everywhere all the time. It's only your own ego that has you in this physical body now. So perhaps you can understand why when people take these drugs, or if they have these spontaneous awakenings, and you have access to all this stuff, no wonder it freaks you out. You know, we're only little me in this little physical body.
So can you give a few tips on how we can awaken slowly, besides from thinking positively and meditate, basically?
Okay, well, meditation is definitely one of the most important. Helping people, doing good deeds, looking after your physical body, and feeling love in your heart for people, and really meaning it, and also having an attitude of what can I do to help, rather than what's in it for me. You know, I'm not saying it's wrong to earn a living because everyone has to pay their bills and so on and so forth. But the more that people can do a good deed every day, the more you can just sit quietly, have a walk around a very quiet garden and just see what's around you and acknowledge the beauty in nature and know that you are part of something far greater than you can even begin to imagine. You can chant because sound, the right sounds can help your brain become more coherent and waken up your sixth sense. What else? Prayer. I mean, for people who, I'm not religious per se, because if there's only one God, why are we all fighting so much? And anyway, as Bill Tiller from Stanford University said to me, humanity in its present form is nowhere near conscious enough to even begin to comprehend what or who God is. You know, we've got no idea yet. There's all this fighting going on because of him, her, whatever, you know. So I think all of those things, and look after your physical self. You know, you're only you in this one lifetime, and you have this physical body, and it is a temple for the divine part of you, to which you are part of, and it's part of you. And so you have to look after yourself and have some treats and have some laughs. Get some laughter in your life. Lighten up and imagine yourself. That's a good one. If everyone can just sit every day, just for 2 minutes, and just imagine a beautiful beam of white light coming into the top of their head and filling their whole body, and then imagine that their whole body is covered by, say, a golden egg, and just see themselves totally at peace and totally protected in that beautiful golden egg that's full of peace and harmony. That's a very protecting way to start the day.
Wow, beautiful. We're out of time, but I'm
so okay.
I'm so glad we got to do this, and it was actually Jude Caravan who connected us. So thank you to Jude.
I'm seeing her in 2 weeks. That's great.
You have to say hello.
I'm going to look at a crop circle.
Oh, how interesting.
My first ever.
Wow. There's so much we could talk about, but time flies. But maybe we can do another interview one day, because there's so much more, I feel like, that we didn't get time to discuss this.
Yeah, there's about another 60 subjects we can move on to.
Yeah. But thank you so much, Hazel, for all this inspiration and valuable information.
All right, good luck in America.
Thank you so much. And thank you for watching, guys, and much light from the UK and Norway. Bye-bye.
Bye.